Hey there, friends. Welcome back. Today I am talking about the 12 books that I have read in the last couple of weeks since we last spoke. So grab a cup of something and let's dive in. I've done a ton of reading in the last 2 weeks. I have actually finished, in 2 weeks, I have finished 12 books. Now, in all fairness, the majority of that has been through audio. The first one I finished, I did do it by audio, and it was To Kill a Shadow by Katherine Quinn. This was the May or June pick by Tasha over at Frogget Yarns for her book club. Now, she pretty much reads strictly fantasy. She does dabble in other things periodically. So, I don't always jive with what she's reading because I'm not as much of a fantasy reader as she is, but every once in a while she picks one that I've already read, or she picks one and I end up loving it. This was not one that I loved. I didn't hate it by any means. It's perfectly fine. There's a sequel that either has come out or is coming out very shortly. I probably won't read the sequel because I just wasn't invested in the characters. I gave it 3 stars. It was fine. Like, I can say that I read it, and again, I didn't hate it, but I didn't love it either. The next book I read was Ready or Not by Cara Bastone. I really enjoyed this book. This has a surprise pregnancy theme in it, but I really liked this book, and I liked it so much, and I love this cover that this weekend I'm gonna dye up sock sets that go with this book cover. The author has a new book out. I think it's called Promise Me Sunshine. I own a copy of it, so I will probably get to it sooner or later. This was a 5-star read for me. I loved this book, even though I'm not always 100% on board with, this is like a friends to lovers, but there's also, again, like a surprise pregnancy, not with a friend, but there's a surprise pregnancy, plotline in it. So this was just really sweet and charming, and I ate it up. This was a great read for me. The next book I read was by audio, and it was Deep End by Ali Hazelwood. If you're not familiar with Ali Hazelwood, I think her debut novel was The Love Hypothesis. She traditionally writes books that are STEM, women in STEM. And I love those books. Now, this is one that is sort of woman in STEM, but this one had to do with diving, like competitive diving and competitive swimming, and also had themes that revolved around sexual kinks. And I knew that going into it, and people kind of used that as the trigger warning. And I have to say that part of things didn't necessarily bother me, but I just couldn't really get into the competitive swimming and diving thing. Like, I'm not an athlete. I was an athlete in high school and in college. Like, I was a dancer, but I was not necessarily, but I wasn't a competitive dancer. I think that's where, though I was an athlete, I was not an athlete in a competitive sense. Like, I was not on a competition team in any regard. So I am not not a competitive person. So, I think it was a 4-star read for me. I will say that. The whole sexual kinks and testing boundaries in that department. That didn't faze me at all. Was it really my thing? Probably not. But at the same time, I think what didn't work for me was something about the main character, and this block she was having in the competitive arena. The next book I read was The Wren in the Library by K.A. Linde. This is a fantasy novel, and I know Tasha over at Frogget Yarns loved this book, and she was super excited about the sequel to it. And it was like, does she cancel her pre-order and go buy the book the day it comes out, or does she wait the few days or the week that she's going to have to get it? Well, it turns out that the day that this book came out, I was going to an author event with my sister, and that day I brought in a box for my sister, and her sequel to that, to The Wren in the Library, had come in, and she couldn't stop talking about The Wren in the Library. And my sister does read fantasy, but she has a broader palette, I guess. My sister is a pretty voracious reader, I would say. She got back into it a few years ago. And she's a pretty wide taste in books. She and I align in a lot of things, but she likes mysteries. I don't, that sort of thing. But she did say The Wren in the Library was so good. So knowing that such a good friend and my sister both really liked this book, I thought there might be something to it. So I did listen to it, and I gave it 4 stars. I'm totally going to read the sequel or listen. I'm totally on board with getting the sequel. Like, I really was invested in that book. There were a couple lulls in the story for me. So I would totally get the sequel. Then, a second book by Kristy Boyce. I believe this is a young adult novel. It's called Dating and Dragons. I had read the first novel. They might be companion novels, but I don't think so. This revolves around teenagers and Dungeons and Dragons. They're cute novels. This one was a 4-star read for me. Cute novels, simple storylines, invested in these teenagers. And though I know nothing about Dungeons and Dragons, I have actually learned a little bit from reading these books by this author, and enough to intrigue me to, if someone ever asked me if I wanted to play, I would be like, okay, and totally learn how to play. The next book I read was Out on a Limb by Hannah Banam-Young. This is another surprise pregnancy, and this was a 4-star read for me. I actually really enjoyed this book. It has a companion novel, or a second one, in its series, and I'm definitely gonna read that one. But unlike this one, where this is friends to lovers, this is surprise pregnancy because contraceptives failed. So even though they both are surprise pregnancies, this one has a much different storyline. I think this one's more easily digestible, whereas this is like one night stand type of scenario. So I know that kind of storyline is not always people's cup of tea, but I really enjoyed this one, and I'm gonna read its sequel. I had an advanced copy of Don't Let Him In by Lisa Jewell. This is a thriller. She is an auto purchase author for me because I enjoy everything that she writes. I gave this one 4 stars as well. This was a great read for me. What I will say is that if you're looking for those hard-hitting thrillers of hers, this is not it. It is not quite as thrillery as what she normally writes. Still a really good book. Got a little eerie at times of, we're dealing with a man who is basically conning women. Like, he's married to one, and then he's going out of town for these trips, but he's conning his current women out of money, and then he's just moving, like, it's a constant sequence, and it is so trippy, and you're just like, oh my gosh. That you want to hate him so much. And then you kind of start to learn backstories, which I think is meant to help you kind of be empathetic towards him, but you still don't really like this main character. The story is definitely told through multiple points of view, but you're really feeling for all of these women. Now, this is a story that I read. There are so many points of view and different timelines. Like, in one chapter, you're 4 years earlier, but then you go to another chapter and it's 4 years before that. So your timeline is bouncing all over the place. Your points of views are bouncing all over the place. I'm not confident. I think if you start the book on the page and then you go to audio version, I don't think you'll have any problems once you kind of grow accustomed to all the women. But I think if you start in audio format, I'm speculating, but I could see where it would be difficult to follow from an auditory standpoint unless you're already invested in the story. The next book I finished was the book club for Troublesome Women by Marie Bostwick. This was a book that I was really anxiously anticipating, and I enjoyed this one. It's not as good. Like, I anticipated this being like a 5-star read for me. It was not. I'd say it's about a 3.5. Like, it's good. It's not great. It takes place during the 1960s when the feminine mystique came out. Before you could, like, there's a scene in the book where she goes to the bank to open her own bank account because she's earning money from writing for this magazine, and her husband just thought it was like a joke. Like, why would you do that? You should focus on our home and our children, type of thing. So she wants to put what little bit of profits she's making from this into her own bank account, and she can't do it without her husband's signature, without like his permission. So there are things like that during this time here in modern society where we feel like women's rights are kind of slowly being ratcheted and deteriorated, this really takes us back to a time before we hit that revolution that really gave us a lot of our rights. So this was an interesting read. Obviously, it takes place during a time before I was even a glimmer in my parents' eyes. So it was an interesting I think this was interesting in the idea of kind of having a glimpse into what life was like for, say, my mom growing up. So this was a good book. Again, and the idea of, okay, this is what life was like when my mom was coming up, and the choices that she had, in college and probably early in her marriage, but also how frustrating that was for women who wanted more for themselves. So definitely an interesting read. I think it had some lulls in it, but definitely a little bit more thought-provoking. Then I read Shield of Sparrows. I listened to this one. This was a fantasy novel. I'm not really sure where I stumbled across this one, but it kept coming up as a recommended book for me. And it's by Devney Perry. I went ahead and listened to this one. I actually did enjoy this one. I will tell you right now, this is an enemies to lovers fantasy novel. That part I was fine with. But it's also a slow burn. And I'm talking slow, like we're like 85% into the book before anything exciting even happens between these two. I think it's a young adult novel. I could be wrong. But I just felt like some of the things, now I listened to it, so maybe I just picked up on the way the author's tone when she read certain things, but I had already foreseen some of the things that came to fruition at that 85% mark in the book. So we'll see. This book, if I remember correctly, had a really huge cliffhanger at the end, so I'll be curious to see what happens in the next book. I think this is one of those books that some people started, and because it's such a slow burn and it does take a dip in the middle where you're like, I don't care about any of this war nonsense. I think it's not everyone's cup of tea, but if you can power through the first 50%, because I'd say the first 20%, all that world building and character introduction, loved it. And then the next like 30%, I was like, oh my gosh, I don't know if I'm going to like this. Where is this going? And then we eventually hit about that 65-70% mark, and I'm like, okay, we're on the upswing again. And then, like I said, at that 80-85% mark, a lot happens during that last 15% of the book. So if you can make it through that middle section, I think it's worth a read. Then I moved on to The Tenant by Freida McFadden. I know she's kind of controversial. A lot of people don't like her. This was one of those books. This one didn't do it for me. I really was not invested in this character. I didn't like him. I kind of saw where some of this might be going. I will say that I didn't see every plot twist in this one, but it was slow. I wasn't invested in the characters, and for me, I'm very character driven. So if I'm not invested in your characters, I'm probably not going to like the book. Then I moved on to a book called Julie Chan is Dead. This one came through my library. I've been on the hold list for a while. It's by Liann Zhang. This one was a 4-star read for me. I will say, though, if you have read Yellowface by K.F. Kwong, this one reminds me a lot of that book. There's a lot of parallels in the two stories. I definitely think Yellowface is a better book, and they don't have the exact plots going on, but there are a lot of similarities. And the last book that I read is A Man Called Uwe by Frederik Bachman. I just finished that one this morning. And this was a 3-star read for me. Not because I didn't like it. The book is fine. But I had watched the movie with Tom Hanks a couple of months ago, and I really enjoyed that depiction of it. And I will say, had I not seen it, I don't know that I would have finished this book. I probably would have DNF'd it. And it's not because it's not well written. I was listening to it, but I felt like this is one of those books, it almost feels like little vignettes where you're kind of jumping forward in time. And you don't, there are things that are implied in the story that aren't blatantly spelled out for you. Like when it comes to the ailments of his neighbor, some of the back and forth about sobs versus outies, like that kind of stuff. I'm like, what? But my husband is a car enthusiast, so I get it. It was just okay for me. So that is everything that I have read in the last 2 weeks. If you have made it this far, go ahead and give me a book emoji. Just let me know that you made it all the way through. If there's something that you think I should be adding to my TBR pile, let me know down below. Until next time, friends, happy reading.